This is a shape sorting puzzle. It's an almost universal learning toy for toddlers, and it's pretty simple to understand, right? The cylinder goes in the circle hole, the triangle goes to the triangle hole, and the cross you put through the cross-shaped hole. But what if I gave you this shape? Where would you put it? In here? Or here? Or how about in here? This shape is an intersection solid formed through the combination of two or more solids, and shapes resulting from this modeling technique possess some pretty interesting properties, and my obsession with them all started here with this shape, known as a bicylinder. Bicylinders are a combination of two cylinders at right angles to each other using what's known as a Boolean intersection. You see, there are a few different approaches to creating three-dimensional objects in CAD. You can start with a primitive like a sphere or cube and push, pull, and sculpt in detail as if working with digital clay, or you can create and define simple objects and then add or subtract them from one another, which results in more complicated objects using Boolean operators. Now, please don't ask me to explain what Boolean actually means because it's well above my pay grade, but it's a really effective way of creating complex geometry in a precise and predictable way. However, on top of adding or subtracting geometry, you can also perform a Boolean intersection, where you're left with only the geometry which was mutually shared between two or more solid objects. And it's the power of this functionality that this video is all about. Going back to the bicylinder, when you Boolean intersect the two cylinders, you get this really interesting result, where from the top, it looks square, but from the sides, it has a circular profile, and it can roll, but only in distinct directions, 90 degrees to each other. It's this really unusual directionality of intersection objects that made me want to investigate them further using this shape sorting puzzle. But as with many design explorations, I wasn't the first to try this out. Andrew Sink did some design experimentation into this concept last year in this really interesting short video, which I highly recommend checking out, link in the description below. Like myself, he found that if you combine the prisms of two or more shapes in a specific way, the resulting intersection object could then pass through all of the shaped holes, but only at certain orientations. Not all shapes work great for this, however, and just like with Andrew's experiments, I found that having a square with the same overall dimensions as the other shapes didn't really work, as it means even without any modifications, all of the shapes can still just pass through the square cutout with no issues. But if you use different geometry, such as a cross, it shows the properties much better. So here's my variation on the shape sorting puzzle. If we take the cylinder on its own, it obviously won't fit through any other cutout but the circle. After all, a cylinder is really just a circle with thickness. But if it's combined with a triangular prism at 90 degrees with a Boolean intersection, then this is the resulting shape, which can now pass through both cutouts. I struggled to find any official names for most of these new shapes, but this one is apparently called a Cork Plug. Adding one more intersection with a cross shape results in this odd looking thing, and it's now able to go through all of the holes, but only at specific orientations. And I find this quantization of movement pretty interesting, if that's even the right word to use here. I reckon it could be taken advantage of in puzzle designs, where this shape is some kind of key, like with this experiment with the resulting intersection object of a cross and rectangular prism, able to pass through the internal pathway, but only in a specific orientation. It turns out that this approach of creating objects using intersections is also great for creating illusions, like this shape known as a triplet. At first glance, this shape just looks like it's made of garbage geometry unless viewed at just the right angles, revealing that it's actually made up of three letters, G, E, and B, which have been combined together using a Boolean intersection. It turns out getting three shapes to work well is pretty difficult. You need a certain amount of geometry in common for them to work with, but you can combine almost any other two together to form really interesting geometry, such as this combination of phrases at a 45-degree angle. It doesn't have to be 90 for it to work well. It It also works for other geometry too, like this one of the Maker's Muse logo. I would absolutely love to see someone make a huge metal sculpture based on this concept, where you walk around it and you reveal different images or phrases. It probably already exists, I just couldn't find an example. But these are all printed in resin on my Prusa SL1S, which I'm currently testing, and I think they look pretty neat. And while I'm still dialing in my settings on that printer, it's the fastest resin printer I've ever worked with. So if you're interested in resin 3D printing, then definitely consider subscribing so you don't miss the review of the SL1S that's coming on the channel in a couple of weeks' time. And now for something completely out of left field. I discovered you can actually Boolean intersect gears for some really interesting results. This shape is the result of 3 spur gears that have been extended using extrude, intersected at 90 degrees to each other. And it has a similar property to the bicylinder, but due to the fact it has teeth, it bites into a corresponding gear style surface in a really interesting way. And if you figured out how to drive it, you could get this 3-dimensional motion from it as long as the orientation is considered. I honestly have no idea what you could use this property for, but there it is. If you have any ideas, let me know in the comments below, because it's really unusual shape to play with. So there you go, my deep dive into creating intersection objects using 3D printing. I feel that modeling using intersections is underutilized, and I think that's probably because it's so hard to visualize the outcome of Boolean intersections. Like, you can add and subtract from solid objects in real life, no problem. You cut away from a block of wood or weld pieces together, but it's incredibly challenging to visualize the outcome of intersections without having a go and just seeing what the results are. So I say, do that. Have a go and see what cool results you can come up with, because as always here on Maker's Muse, it's my aim to empower creativity through technology. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.